And hundreds of people have been arrested in France as rioting and looting continues across the country. It's been going on for days now.
Yes, 40,000 police officers were deployed as anger over a police shooting that killed a 17-year-old boy on Tuesday reached boiling point.
But let's get more live from Paris now with the journalist David Chazan. And David, we're expecting more violence over this weekend. The French authorities just haven't been able to put a lid on this.
No, and that was despite deploying 40,000 police officers across the country last night. And what we saw was, rather than a calming down, we saw an intensification of violence. It spread to more cities in the country. I think, although we haven't got an official tally of it yet, but there seems to have been more damage done, more shops smashed up and vandalised and looted as well, and certainly a lot more arrests, more than 600 over the country and more than 300 in Paris alone. Now, here in the Paris area where I am, the violence was previously limited to the sort of blue-collar, mainly immigrant suburbs of Paris, where you get rows and rows of tower blocks. They're not at all what we think of as suburbs in the UK. But last night, there were worrying signs for Parisians that the violence was beginning to move into the heart of the city, where we saw shops vandalised on the Rue de Rivoli, just a few minutes' walk from the Louvre Museum. So it's getting worse and it's spreading.
Yes, and I mean, this isn't going to die down anytime soon, is it? Because what we are talking about here is also racial tensions. I mean, what we know about this 17-year-old boy is he's from a French-Algerian family. His mother says that he was shot lethally by a police officer as he drove away from a traffic stop. But she says he'd been stopped 5 or 6 times in the past 2 years. She feels as though he had been picked upon by police officers because of the colour of his skin.
Yeah, and that's certainly the feeling of most people in the ethnic communities. But I do have to say that he was only 17. You can't get a driving licence in France until the age of 18. So whatever else happened, he was driving illegally. But one thing that's particularly angered people is that initially the police version of events was that the officer discharged his firearm because the car that the teenager was in was being driven at speed towards him and his colleague. But then mobile phone footage, which happened to have been filmed by a bystander, emerged, which seems to completely contradict the police version. It shows the 2 officers standing to the side of the vehicle. It's stationary. One of them is pointing his gun at the youth. Then you see the car pulling away and you hear a shot being fired. Now, last night, the police officer's lawyer, because this officer is now in prison awaiting trial on murder charges, his lawyer said that he had said sorry, that he was sorry for the teenager's death and he was sorry for the family, but nevertheless he was sticking to his argument that he did the right thing, that he had to fire because there was potential danger either to him and to his colleague or to members of the public. But the public prosecutor had said that the evidence he's obtained so far from his preliminary inquiry appears to indicate that the conditions for a legal use of the officer's weapon were not met.
No one comes out of this well. The police officer whose story was evidently less than truthful, the rioters who are looting and burning cities across Paris, but also the French president, who himself has come under some criticism for, while cities were on fire, Emmanuel Macron was attending an Elton John concert.
Well, that's right. So he's inevitably faced criticism, particularly from right-wing politicians who say it's not a good look for the president to be photographed with Elton John and his wife Brigitte and Elton John's husband David Furnish on a night when many suburbs around the country are going up in flames and there's such awful violence. Now, President Macron has also come under fire for his initial reaction to this shooting when he described it as inexcusable and incomprehensible. And right-wing politicians then jumped on him and said that it wasn't his role to judge whether the police officer was guilty or not, and that in France you're always innocent until proven guilty. So they criticised him for that. Now they're criticising him for just seeming to go about his life as normal, as if nothing much were going on.
Well, David Chazan, thank you so much for comprehensively taking us through that story. No doubt it's going to go on, and it's one we will return to on Britain's Newsroom. But for now, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Yeah, and I would be concerned about my safety if I were in the Parisian suburbs this weekend. I mean,
or indeed, as he was saying, closer into the centre.
Yeah.
Closer into the centre.
Because it does look set to continue over the weekend. Really horrific scenes of cars being burnt out and shops being looted. Let's hope that Macron can get a grip of things.
Yeah.